Hello everyone and welcome to DES 113. This is our typography class. I am Mrs. Woodland and I am here to talk to you about our assignments for this week. We're going to jump into our course materials. I'm not going to go over everything in the syllabus, but I am going to kind of introduce what is going to be expected in this course and some things that we need to kind of look for as we move in through each week. Now, I'm under the understanding that a few guests are going to be joining us from the other sections, so welcome. If you're watching this from home, welcome as well. Let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to email me or reach out via text during the office hours that I have posted on the syllabus. We're going to go ahead and stop the video and I'm going to jump right into our lecture because we've got a lot to cover. And I'll kind of wait to see as more students come in. We'll start with some of the demos. So I want to talk about first Design 113. This is our typography class. Now I usually like to get a feel for how many students are familiar with the design programs that we're going to be using. Today we're going to be designing our logos, which is our first assignment. That's our logo design. Now it's not just any logo design, specifically our Lettermark logo design. In fact, we're going to be designing these and we are going to be only using it's exclusively typographics. So we're not going to be using any, we're not going to be doing any graphics or pictures or anything like that, any images. This will be just strictly using our type. So that's the challenge. And then we also have assessment, let's go back here. We'll have assessment 1, which is a basic typesetting exercise. And for this assessment, you're going to be graded on how well you can follow instructions. Did you understand the typesetting jargon that we talked about this week? And then also, did you remember to follow the instructions? This is key. I'll be posting an updated rubric today, one with a little bit more specifics as far as what to expect in the grading. So please check the rubrics every week before you submit your assignment. This will allow you to avoid any surprises or wonder why you got docked points or how you can improve. So this will be a great kind of checklist as you're doing your assignment to make sure you've got all the basic elements in there. Now, for the basic typesetting exercise, I'll go ahead and do a quick demo for you guys a little bit into the lecture, but you're going to be using InDesign for this basic typesetting exercise, and we're going to be using Illustrator for the logo designs. So a little bit different. Each program does something different. I wanted to ask, are you guys familiar with InDesign or Illustrator at all? If this is a truly beginner's course for you, then you're kind of in the right place. If you already have experience, you'll just be that much better off. But we are going to be starting with bare bone basics in this class. So just remember, follow the instructions. There's 5 pages, and each page it gives you some specs, and then it will give you some text to include. So you'll want to make sure you do that. But I'll do a demo on that as we move forward. Please note that discussions are, your first initial post is due this Wednesday before midnight Mountain Standard Time. That's 11 o'clock Pacific Time. That is 1 a.m. Let's see, Central, and 2 a.m. Eastern Time. So please make sure you get those in and turned in. So what it is a discussion post. It will give you some instructions. Follow all of the instructions and then make your post. It does need to be a minimum of 150 words. So you will be counted on your word count, but you are graded on your word count, but you will also be graded on whether or not you got that initial post in by Wednesday. Then the rest of the posts are just follow up to your peer comments and kind of interacting with students. Discussions are how I take daily attendance in class, so there are no makeups for discussions. You can't turn in any late discussion points because if you were absent that week or that day, there's no way to make that up. So just make sure you stay on it and don't miss the discussions because they're kind of an easy way to get some points. Also wanted to talk about the daily checkpoints. This is often overlooked by many students. A lot of students decide to omit the daily checkpoints or they don't take them as seriously. They're worth 5 points each, but if you do more than 4 in a week, that counts as extra credit. That's about 10 to 15 points extra credit that you could potentially earn in class. Now, while we don't give extra credit, if you do more than 4 and get them correct, you can earn those extra points as added to your grade. So they're a great way to boost your grade. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and end with the, I guess well, one more announcement I did want to make. Week 2, we're going to have a bit of a scheduling change, and I wanted to let you know, usually we're going to be holding lecture Monday and Wednesdays, or I'm sorry, Mondays lecture, multi-sessions are on Wednesdays, same time. However, next week, due to the Memorial Holiday weekend, we're going to switch the time. So we're going to do Monday teaching, multi-session is on Tuesday instead of Wednesday. So on the 23rd, we're going to have our multi-session instead of the 24th. I'll send out an email and announcement reminder so that everyone's aware of that. But I just wanted to let you know what to look forward to. And then after that, we'll resume normal scheduling, Monday, Wednesday schedule for the rest of the mod. So I just want to let you know that's the only week that we will have a slight change. All right, well, let's continue and let's talk about what is typography. Let's get into this because we have a whole module dedicated to our typography class. And I wanted to kind of get a feel from you. What do you think typography is? If someone were to ask you to give a definition of typography, or what's your class about, what would you say? From a descriptive and simplistic point of view, typography is the art and the technique of arranging type. So most people never think about typography really, unless you're a designer. If you're going to graphic design, obviously you're thinking in letters and in type and in illustrations, and you're thinking all in that. You're already in that mindset. But to the regular average Joe, they don't really understand the psychological effect that it has in relation to conveying a message, which is why we as graphic designers get to charge the big bucks. We get to make a pretty penny off of the fact that we do understand that there's a psychological effect. We do understand that the right font choice can make or break a design, or a logo design for that matter. So if you've ever seen the movie, I usually like to get a show of hands who've seen the movie The Holiday. It's the one with Cameron Diaz, and does anyone remember that? She plays Amanda Woods. So Cameron Diaz's character is Amanda Woods, and she is a movie trailer maker. So in one scene, she asks her coworkers to make the type for the movie header that she's working on. And she says, I want it twice as big, but try it in a red, like a happy red, but not a sorceress red. This character understood the fact that color and type can make or break a design. So that's all part of the art that is typography. Color choices, font choices, size choices, how much space is between your letters, how tight are your letters. This is all very, very important. Typography is 95% of design. It's a driving force in all forms of communication art. That's why it plays such a huge part in the graphic design industry. A lot of messages, a lot of advertisements, a lot of people out there trying to get their message out, no matter if it's for a nonprofit organization or if it's for a retail store, entertainment or restaurant or whatever it may be. Everyone's got a message. Everyone is trying to communicate something, whether it's buy my product or buy my service or perhaps listen to my cause. Can you imagine reading a magazine or checking out a website, playing with an app or whatever it is that you do on your smart devices, watching TV without text? I find it'd be kind of boring. It wouldn't be as entertaining, and I think it would lose its luster. So just think about that. Think about a magazine that you might have laying on your desk right now, or magazines that you like to read, or a book, or even a favorite show or an app. There's some kind of typography going on there being used in some way, whether it's the logo or the name of the show or whatever it is. So your homework assignment is to, as you flip through the TV, to pay attention to the different typography, different fonts that are used for different messages. It could be, you'll be watching the news and they'll probably have something different than maybe your favorite sitcom show. Or if you're reading your magazine, notice how they structure and design the typography when they're doing their layouts. So everything in typography is important, but 95% of it is design. All right, so let's talk about exactly how typography conveys a feeling. The choice of typography can affect how a piece is understood. I want you to consider these two examples. I'm going to throw this on the board here. if it'll let me do it. And if it lets me pull it in, I want you to consider which one is more appropriate considering the title of the article. It didn't look like it let me do that. I'll just put it on my desktop and drag it in. Give me just a second. Oops. Sorry, guys. Okay, so here's the example. So the one on the left is an example. This is an article on private equity. And then the one on the right is also an article on private equity. But I want you to think about the choice of the typeface that was used. There's one being used, there's 4 going on here, 2 on the left side, 2 on the right side. I want you to think about how the choice of typeface can affect how a piece is understood. What message is the one on the left sending, and what message is the one on the right sending? So consider these examples. Which is more appropriate for this type of article, private equity? Most people would automatically choose the example on the left because the font size and the type, this all elicits a feeling of power, seriousness, and importance. While the one on the right is a little bit more fun, light, and playful. So if I was talking about private equity, that seems to be more of a serious topic. I would try to go with a font that kind of illustrates that seriousness or that power or that importance so that I'm heard. If I saw an article using a silly font about a very serious subject, I would not be able to take it seriously as a reader or as an audience member. So it's very important that we choose our fonts wisely. So we can see that in this example. Okay, let's do another one. Let's talk about how it keeps people reading and how it can turn people away if it's used inappropriately. So let's look at this next example I'm going to pull in here. This one is an example about good and bad typography. Good typography is a utilitarian in that it should allow the reader to focus on the content and not the formatting. So I want you to pay attention. Okay, what are you focusing on the left? And what are you focusing on the right? Good typography often goes unnoticed because it just makes sense. It flows so well that people don't think twice about it. But when you see something that's kind of out of place or that clashes, it almost strikes your attention, but in a very negative way. So I want you to consider these 2 examples here. Which article is more legible, readable? Which one is more user-friendly, easier on the eyes? Which one would you say? I guess I should probably ask, which one would you rather keep reading? The example on the left is very clear. It's simple, it's easy to read, whereas the one on the right example, this has far too many colors, too many font styles, and it's all on a background that's very disconcerting to the eye. So it all just clashes. And you'll learn as we go through this class that when it comes to font color and font choice, as far as the fonts, the choice of font or how many fonts you have in a design, the rule of thumb is no more than 3. 2 is best. So that's kind of what I like to steer my students in that direction when you're designing, whether it's a logo or as we get further into the mod, you'll be designing a grand opening invitation. You're going to be encouraged to use color, but we don't want to paint the rainbow on our invitation. We want to make sure that we stick to that rule of thumb. No more than 3 colors, no more than 3 font choices, but 2 is best. So that's what I say. I say stick to 2 of each and you'll have a beautiful, very clean, simple design. If you start throwing in more, it gets a little convoluted. Now, can this rule be broken? Absolutely, but only by professionals. I usually say get a handle on the rules and then you can break them. So that's kind of the rule of thumb when it comes to colors and font styles. So let's talk about elements of good typography here, because we kind of see many fonts used in the right example here. I've seen 4 fonts being used, which for one, the leading is too tight, the spacing is all off, and then you've got all these different fonts clashing for attention, like they're competing for attention is what this is. So let's talk about, first thing is consistency. In any typographical work, the consistent use of typefaces or kerning or leading, bullets, and formatting, it's very critical. Now I'm using this terminology, I hope you're following along. When it comes to leading, can anyone tell me what that means? What does leading mean when you hear me say leading? Yeah, it's usually the space between lines of text, right? So in this case, in this pink example or this blue example here on the right, the leading is extremely tight, so much so that the ascenders of the or the descenders of the type are actually touching. And so that's a big no-no. We don't want to do that. We want to give breathing room, so some elbow room. So we want to make sure there's a good even amount of white space between lines of text. So that's leading. So if you hear me say tighten up your leading, that means your lines are too spread out, too far apart, almost where they're disconnected. But if I say loosen up your leading or kind of increase your leading, that means give a little bit more white space in between so that your lines of text can breathe and be more readable. If you hear me say you're tracking or kerning, this is the spacing between your letters. So this would be a good example on the pink side where letters are very close together. So you want a little bit more breathing room. There is a big difference in tracking when it comes to the pink example as the letters on the left. There's a lot more breathing room between each letter. And so that's also nice. But you don't want to spread it out so much where, again, it looks disconnected. You want an even amount of tracking on that. That helps it be readable, but still gives you some breathing room for the eye. All right, so that's the definition there. So also, when we're talking about consistency, consistency makes the work look professional. It also keeps your readers focused on the content and not the formatting, like I said before. We're also going to be talking a little bit about hierarchy. We'll get into hierarchy more next week, I believe, for the grand opening invitation. But it is important that your text gets read in the order that it's meant to be read in. So if you'll notice on this example, both examples here, if I were to ask you which is the largest font on the page, it would probably be the headline, right? And that's usually what people go to first to find out what the article is even about. So headline is usually always the largest. And then second, maybe a subheadline, maybe and then your body text. And then you might have some subtitles sporadically interspersed in your article. But for the most part, you get to tell the reader in what order you want them to look at the message. So take a book for consideration. The title is the first thing that the reader sees, right? Then the author's name, which is the byline, followed by the chapters, and then the story. So hierarchy really intentionally guides the reader through the content. It's just basically saying this is what I want you to read first, this is what I want you to read second, third, and so on. So often with the best-selling authors, their name will appear larger or the same size as the title of the book. Not very often though, but this is because the designer is aware that the author has an existing fan base, but that's either here or there. Just be aware that you as the designer you have a say basically in what is going to be noticed first, second, and third. The next thing I want to talk about is alignment. Alignment helps keep the look of the piece unified. It's a flush left or a flush right alignment. This gives the piece a strong edge, a strong line for the viewer's eye to follow. It also tends to give a more sophisticated look than a centered alignment. As you can see here in this pink example on the right, it's all centered. I would say it's almost amateurish. There's a right time and a right place to use centered text, but try to steer clear of it. Try to get in the habit of using left flush alignments because this tends to give, like I said, a more sophisticated look over the centered alignment, and this is often the choice of typography novices, meaning if you know your stuff, you're usually using the left alignment. So let's just make sure that just in summary, let's move to the next slide. So we talked about font choices a little bit. We talked about emphasis, hierarchy, scaling. Scaling is large and small. And then the arrangement, where you're positioning things in proximity to each other. So are things close together or are they far apart? And this is proximity. So when you have something really spread out, it can almost look disconnected or ungrouped. But when you have something really close together or items close together, that proximity now tells me as the reader or the viewer that these items are supposed to be grouped together for a reason. So proximity can, again, these are all things that can make or break your design if they're used incorrectly. So just be aware of that. When you're laying out your logo designs, make sure that your letters aren't too spread apart, but also make sure they're not too clumped together where you can't make out what the letters are. So again, proximity plays a key part. We talked about alignment, consistency, and then just making sure that you make the proper font choice. Now let's talk about font choices for our logo designs for a second. We've kind of made the job easy on you. There are 2 different folders that you'll be downloading fonts in. One is for PC users and the other will be for Mac users. We've already given you a selection of 9 or 10 fonts that you can choose from for your various logo designs. You will need to make appropriate choices based on the type of genre or industry that you're designing for. You're going to be designing for 4 companies: a restaurant, a bank, a computer company, which is a tech company, and then also a toy company. So each one's going to have their own vibe, right? I mean, like we talked about, typography communicates a message. We want to make sure that our font choices are communicating the proper message based on the type of company that they're representing. All right, so let's continue. Let's look at what else we need to know. So back to visual communication. A lot of times graphic design is combining text and imagery in a very pleasing aesthetic way. So to make sure that you're doing it correctly, I always say try to be as clear and direct as possible, use as few words as possible. This is overall graphic design. Make sure the message is correct and coming across. But even still, this last question I want you to ask with your logo designs, is the correct message coming across? Meaning, does this font represent this bank, or does it look more like it goes with a toy company? Does the arrangement of my letters in my logo look playful or serious? And does that message come across based on the type of company it's representing? So I want you to ask yourself these questions as you're designing, especially since we're all beginners at logo design. I think Lettermark designs are some of the hardest logos to do. They're the simplest, but they're very hard because they require a lot of thinking, a lot of creativity, and also it kind of will make or break the fact that you have a handle on how logo design is supposed to flow. So we can't rely on words and we can't rely on graphics. We kind of have to just rely on the bare bones, and we have to structure it in such a way that it looks different. So when you're designing your logos, I want to make sure that your bank logo looks extremely different than your toy company logo. We don't want similar fonts and we don't want similar positioning of the letters. So it needs to have a completely different look. That's the idea here. So ask yourself, how can your typography choices help or hinder your design? Okay, I want you to think about that every time you lay something out, and lay things out with purpose. That's probably the most important part. Is just because something looks cool may not mean it's supposed to go, or maybe it doesn't help promote the message or promote the company. So we need to make sure that we're kind of reining in our creativity a little bit and try to design in such a way that's simple and clear. We want to make sure those 2 adjectives stick out. All right, let's talk about things we're not supposed to use. Here's the thing: multiple fonts, especially in your logo designs. Now, I talked about the rule of thumb of no more than 3, but 2 is best. In our logo designs, you won't need to use multiple fonts. I suggest you just stick with 1 font per company. You'll have 8 designs, so that'll be 8. That'll be, I don't know, 4 different fonts. And you can use different font styles within the font family, but I wouldn't use Times New Roman for the bank and then use Times New Roman for the toy company. It wouldn't make sense. You were given you're given options to use and to choose from, so have fun with it. Try different fonts and see which ones convey the right message. All right, so let's look at this. This is how things look when you use too many fonts. This gets messy. 1 font 2, font 3, font 4, don't use this many fonts no more. This is a good rule of thumb. So this is how things look when you keep it simple. So look at this bottom right example. It's just 1 font and it looks clean, it's clear, and I can read it. That's what's important. All right. Here's another don't use. Don't stretch fonts or use hard to read fonts, especially it's very tempting when we're designing for, say, a restaurant, an Italian bistro restaurant. I have a lot of students that kind of automatically go to the scriptive, cursive, almost handwriting fonts. They like the fancy fonts because they think it's a restaurant. Actually, try to steer away from that stigma. For one, the typographic cursive lettering is very hard to read, and it's hard to make out the letters, and often doesn't look very good. I would say almost steer clear of it. Use a good sans serif font or a good serif font to get your message across. But above all, do not stretch your fonts, please, in your letters. The best way to avoid that is if you hold down Shift, it will constrain your proportions so you can resize objects in Illustrator, as I'm doing now, without squishing it, okay? Without doing this or without doing this. So if you hold down Shift as you click on an anchor point, you can resize it up and down and it will constrain the proportions so that letters don't get stretched and words don't get stretched. So that's a good rule of thumb I would use. Typographic style is good for signage. Sans serif font is an excellent choice if you're going to design something for signage, something that's going to be seen far away like a billboard. It's because the serifs kind of help guide the eye to the next letter, so it helps the lettering flow. Sans serifs are nice and they're contemporary and modern, but sometimes they're hard to read if they're in a big body of text. So there's a time and a place to use serif and sans serif. But like this typographic style, it's very bad for signage. It'd also be kind of bad for logo design because it's hard to make out the letters. So I would say steer clear of that kind of formatting. And then never do this. Have you ever used all caps when you're texting someone or received a message that was in all caps? It just sends a very negative message. Not only that, but it's very hard to read if it's in a cursive font like this. So it basically just avoid that altogether. Okay, let's talk about the anatomy and the terminology of these letters. It's very important that we understand the terminology because as I'm grading and giving feedback, I really want you to kind of know what I'm talking about, but also when I'm talking in class that you'll know what I'm talking about. So we talked about the ascenders, which is how high a letter extends. So this H here, the tippy top of this H, that's the ascender. The Y, how it extends to the bottom, that is a descender. Okay, so those little, that's just how far a font stretches upward and how far a font will stretch downward. There's also something called, uppercase and lowercase characters, but also the baseline here is where the base of the letters rest. Okay, the descender line is where the descenders rest. So those are basically the things that you'll need to know. Hopefully everyone understands what a serif is. It's just these little tick marks or these extra little marks that come off of the letter to kind of help guide the eye. And the ascender height are some elements may extend slightly above the cap height. And with the descender height, the length of the letter's descenders contributes to its overall style and attitude. So based on the typographic choice that you make, it will have certain descenders, and this is kind of stylizes your font. This kind of sets it apart from the other fonts. So that's kind of neat to know. The baseline is where all the letters sit, like I mentioned before. This is the most stable access along a line of text, and it's a crucial edge for aligning text with images or with other text. So if you hear me say, I want your baseline to line up with your columns of text and the baselines aren't lining up, or the image and your baseline are not lining up, just make sure that you know that that's what I'm talking about. It's just the base of your text right there. Okay. All right. And the X height is just the height of the main body of the lowercase letter. So that's what I'm referring to if I ever use that term. It excludes the A centers and D centers. So it's basically just the middle portion of your type. All right. Let's talk about understanding the letter form. Now, it's very important to kind of have a basic knowledge of what these letters, you know, do, what the terminology is. X heights, we went over. Size is a given. We kind of understand that with size, it's just large or small, and the anatomy we kind of talked about a little bit. I'm going to skip over that due to time. Let's talk a bit about serif and sans serif for just a minute. Actually, you know what? We'll just go right into this. So let's talk about type, categories, and classification, because this is also very interesting. A basic system for classifying typefaces was actually devised in the 19th century. It's kind of interesting. When printers sought to identify a heritage for their own craft that was similar to that of art history, humanist letter forms are very closely connected to calligraphy and the movement of the hand. Transitional and modern typefaces are more abstract and less organic, as you will have noticed. These three main groups really correspond roughly to the Renaissance, Baroque, and even the Enlightenment periods in art and in literature. I don't know if we have any history buffs in this class, but if you are, historians and critics of typography have really since proposed more finely grained schemes that kind of attempt to better capture the diversity of letter forms. And designers in the 20th and 21st centuries have continued to create new typefaces based on historic characteristics. So even though we have new, modern, contemporary, I should say, typefaces, their characteristics are kind of reminiscent of what's been done in the past. They almost have a historical flair to them. So it's really kind of cool as you study the different types, different typefaces. You kind of start recognizing the characters. I've kind of gotten to a point now where I can recognize what a font is just by looking at it, looking at the lettering. I don't need to know what it's called because I just kind of automatically recall it. I've just used it so many times. So it's pretty neat to see each one's got its own unique characteristics. All right. So type families. In the 16th century, printers began organizing Roman and italic typefaces into matched families. So the concept was formalized in the early 20th century to include styles such as bold, semi-bold, and small caps. So I would ask, how many of you come from a big family? And then how many of you come from a small family? You'll notice with each font, there's a big family and there's a small family. Times New Roman has been around for ages. So Times New Roman has a big family of characters and type styles. And so you'll find that there's lots of different typefaces within that are kind of grouped into matched families. So that's kind of neat. Let's see. Whoops, what else do we need to know? Let's move on. Let's talk about serif font. Now, serif versus sans serif. First, it was the Capulets versus the Montagues. Then it was Coke versus Pepsi. And the latest epic battle, I think, in the graphic design industry is serif versus sans serif, of course. Luckily for us, the crew at Steven Zenneker has kind of separated and made it easy for you guys to choose between serif and sans serif. This is an approved list. I'm hoping to help clarify the age-old rivalry for you guys between serif and sans serif. It comes down to preference, really, but I have there's an infographic I'll share with you guys later on. I might post it in the announcements, but in typography, serifs are the small lines that tail from the edges, as you can see right here, of the letters and the symbols, and they're separated into distinct units for a typewriter or a typesetter. Whereas sans serif is a typeface that doesn't have these small projecting features called serifs. Okay, at the end of their strokes, it's just very clean lines. So serif is I guess they're easier to read in printed works, that's for sure. Because large bodies of text, I would recommend using serif fonts. This is because the serif font this is because the serif makes the individual letters more distinctive, and it's easier for our brains to recognize very quickly. So without the serif, the brain has to spend longer identifying the letter because the shape is less distinctive, if that makes any sense. Whereas on the other side, sans serif fonts are better on the web. So if you're a web designer, this is more modern, minimal, magnificent. An important exception must be made for the web. Printed works generally have a resolution of at least 1,000 dots per inch, whereas computer monitors are typically around 100 dots per inch. So because of that, sans serif fonts are used more frequently on the web. There's lots of different classifications, serif and sans serif. We won't get into that. The examples you'll find as you're looking through your approved list that there are different fonts that use serifs and different fonts that use sans serif styling. And so it's just important to know which one appeals to you and which one best fits the design or the logo. Now, the best font choices are ones where the readers do not even notice the font at all, but they only notice the message. So I want you to remember that. Very important. We don't want to distract from the message. Now, given the fact that you do have options to choose from on an approved list, we won't really be too concerned about you using the wrong fonts because you're going to be using the ones from the approved list. But if you were to kind of be set free to choose between fonts of your own choice, there's a few popular ones that kind of have been overused. One is Papyrus. This one is a very unique font, but it's often overused, and so we talk about avoiding that in logo design. Also, Comic Sans. This is often misused and is very, I should say, kind of juvenile. There's not really an appropriate place for Comic Sans in any logo design, especially the ones that you have going on this week. So just try to avoid that. It's often misused and not used appropriately. And then Bleeding Cowboys. This is a sans serif font that is often used, but it's kind of abused a lot, not used appropriately as well. So again, I could even add Apple Chancery to this list. That's another font that I say steer clear of because it's a very scriptive font and it's just been overused. So, all right, here is the terminology that you will have heard me use. Oblique is italics. Baseline, we talked about ascenders. Let's see, drop caps. We'll get into that next week. But just be aware that we're going to be using this terminology, and I want to see you using the terminology in the discussions when you're talking to your peers or critiquing work. We have week 2 and week 3 of critiquing our logo designs and our grand opening invitation designs. So I want you to use terminology in your critiques as well. And also as you are writing about your designs, I want to also hear what was the thought process behind why you did what you did, or what was the message you were trying to convey. And you get bonus points for using terminology we've been using in class. Okay, so let's talk about typeface. It's a collection of typefaces that were designed and intended to be used together. This is very important. Now, rule of thumb is to just look at families. Family names like Baskerville, Universe, Bodoni, Helvetica, these are all families that you can choose from in your options list. Some families are large, others are small, like we talked about, but each family has many family members like Roman, italic, light, condensed, bold, or semi-bold. A lot like Word. You can choose a font and then give it a family member, a different style within the family. Font style is what I call it. Okay, so in terms of the letters, numbers, and symbols that make up a design of type, the individual typefaces are named after the family, and they're also specified with a designation, such as italic, bold, or condensed. So we talked about that just a little bit ago. Helvetica Bold is referred to as a typeface. So that's important to know. Now we'll get into this in week 3. You get to do a fun project where you get to create a type or typographic portrait of some kind where you can use the typeface that you've been doing research on, choose the typeface and create a portrait out of it. So this is really cool, but you can also see how, you know, a sans serif versus a serif font, the different stylings of the font can create a different image altogether, or a different kind of feel altogether. All right, so we're talking about font. A font has one weight, width, and style of a typeface. Now, before digital type, a font usually referred to a specific font point size of a particular style of a typeface. So, for example, 10-point Helvetica Bold would have been considered a font. But today, the terms font and typeface and family are often used interchangeably. So that's just something that's happened recently. Now, one of the variations in appearance, such as italic and bold, that make up the faces in a typeface family, these are all found in your font book. You can kind of experiment with the different type styles. But again, you're given an approved list to use of sans serif and serif, and there are plenty to choose from. So you can experiment with those. All right, and I had a video to show you, but I can do this quick demo for you. So we're gonna go ahead and stop this and we'll switch over to our InDesign. We'll pull up InDesign and we'll talk a little bit about leading and kerning. Let's create a new document together. We'll get started on introducing our assessment 1, our very first assessment for the week. So if you'll click on your new document, file, new document, and while mine thinks, it's going to pull up a new document dialog box here. And this is where you're going to enter in very specific measurements. So your first typesetting exercise is to create a 5-page document. So where you'll do that is here, the number of pages, where you'll specify you want 5 pages, and you want to deselect or uncheck facing pages. Facing pages means the pages are viewed side by side, and in this case, we don't want that. We want them to be separate pages. Start on page 1, that's obvious. Then you can just do a standard letter page, 8.5 by 11. You can choose to do it, 11 by 8.5, so it does need to be landscaped. If you have your page size set to letter, it will be a standard 8.5 by 11. If you click on the orientation, you want to select landscape. What that does is that automatically kind of sets you up back here. It just flips your page over, so you don't have to change your width or height. So that's kind of a handy little trick. Then you're going to want to set your margins to the following. Now, these margins are also in your assessment 1 exercise, so just pay attention to how we do it. Okay, so here's your margins box right here. For the top, you want it to be 1.5 inches. Now notice that my default increment of measurement is in picas. It can be in picas or inches. In this case, because mine is in default picas, I have to type in the word inch after I type in my value so that I make sure it converts it correctly. So 1.5 inches is equivalent to 9 picas. Don't ask me what the math is. I have no idea. If this bugs you, you can go change it in your preferences, I believe, or your settings. But right now, all I did was type in 1.5 inches, and that gave me what I needed. Make sure that as you're doing this, you deselect this chain link. We want to break the chain link. What this does, it makes all the settings the same, but each setting is going to have a different value, so we don't want the settings to be the same. For the bottom, this one's going to be 2.5 inches. So as you can see, the values are different. In the left, you're going to want to do 1 inch, and in the right, you want 1 inch. Okay? So there we go. So now we've got our 4 different values. We'll hit OK, and this is what your page should look like after you get it set up. All right, so we're going to go into some exercises here. I usually like to I usually like to have students kind of follow along with me if you can. We're going to just type out a word here. Truth. And I'm going to make it large so that you can see what I'm doing. And if you open up your window, drop-down menu, go to Type in Tables, and click on Character. A character box will open up. And this is where you can adjust your tracking and your leading. Your leading is right across from your font size. So your font size is right here, and your leading is right here, okay? Now, usually there's a default leading, so based on the size of your font, but if I were to adjust leading, I would need more lines of text. So in this case, let me just copy this word more than once so that you can see what leading really is. All right, so pretend this is 2 lines of text. If I highlight it and decrease my leading, you can see that the words are getting closer together, the lines of text are getting tighter, and now my ascenders are running into my descenders, okay? If I increase my leading, you can see that the words or the lines of text are getting further apart. So it's important to strike a good balance where the letters aren't too tight, but there's some breathing room there. Now, what's tracking? You've heard me say tracking before. Tracking is the distance between your letters of your words, okay? So if I increase tracking, my letters become more spread apart. Do you see that? My tracking is right below my leading setting right here. If I were to decrease my tracking, they're going to get super, super tight, almost to the point where they overlap. So the rule of thumb here, the trick is to just set it as a default of 0, because that's just a defaulted tracking. It's automatically set for you. But if you needed to adjust, and there's lots of cases that you would need to, I suggest trying to give it even amount of spacing between each letter. Okay, so that's leading and that's tracking. Now you can also adjust other things, but I'm not going to show you those. You don't think you'll need them for this exercise. So let's jump right into our page 1. So as you can see, we've got 5 pages here. The instructions tell me that on page 1, it does say to use master pages. This would be a lot easier. So what I'm going to show you to do, what I'm going to show you how to do is to set up your master pages. So if we go to our window drop-down menu, the window drop-down menu is kind of like your toolbox. It's got basically all your tools in this drop-down menu, and just based on the topic, we'll pull out several tools that you'll need. So first one we're going to need for our master pages is to go to Pages, click on Pages, and again another box will pop up. And you can see here, I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with how to use master pages, but it is pretty simple. If you just double click on your A master right here at the top, you'll see there's master pages at the top divided by this little divider line. And then you can see as you scroll down, there's your 5 standard pages that you're designing. What are master pages? Well, master pages are used kind of as a basic template that's applied to all the pages in your document. So whatever I put on my A master is going to be applied to all of my 5 pages, which is very handy because if I'm designing a 100-page book or a 100-page magazine, or I should say 500-page book and a 100-page magazine, I'm not going to want to include the same footer. I'm not going to want to go in there 500 times and doing it manually. So what I need to do is create a footer for my assignment. And the instructions ask us to typeset our name at 8-point sans serif in the bottom left-hand part of the page, about 2 inches from the bottom, aligned flush left. So that's a lot going on. Let's make sure we're double-clicking on our A master. If it's highlighted in gray, that means that you were on the page that's selected. Grab your type tool on the toolbar, or you can press T on your keyboard. I'm going to go down about 2 inches, 1, 2. I'm using my ruler right here on the left-hand side. So 2 inches is about right here. I'm going to draw a little text box. I'm going to put my name. This is Woodland. And we want to make sure that this is 8 points. So I can change my point size here at the top, or go back to Window, click on Type in Tables, click Character. So with your character box open, I can change my font size to 8. And I also need to change it to a sans serif font. So I'm going to use Futura. Futura just seems to be a common sans serif font that we've got on our list, I believe. And make sure, so it's 8-point font, it's a sans serif font, and that's all I need to do. So, all right, so now with that said, if I go back to page 1, look at that, it's right there. If I go back to page 3, it's right there. If I go to 5, it's right there, and I didn't have to enter it 5 times. So it saved me, I'd say, about 5 minutes of time making sure, and it's in the same place on each page. If we were to try to eyeball it on each page, it would not be accurate. So this is another helpful, useful tool when using master pages. If you need to go make a change on your master element, you got to go to your master page. You want to just delete it from your page. Just right click and click on Override all master page items. And that will allow you to delete it or select it if you need it. Okay, so we've got our master page set up. Now we need to the text is provided already, so the word is truth. And the specs say I'm going to grab my character box, open it up, Window, Type in Tables. Got my character box right here. So the font size is supposed to be 225. So I'll enter that in. And then it's supposed to be 225 leading. I'll enter that in. Now if it disappears, it just means that your box isn't big enough, so you kind of need to stretch it out. Grab those blue anchor points on the left or right hand side of the box. And I'm going to kind of just line this up with my margin line. Okay, so just look at the space between the letters. Does it look even? Use the kerning tool to make any needed adjustments. If you wanted to even out the kerning or the tracking here, you could do that. I personally think it looks fine, so that's all we really need to do on page 1. Let's move to page 2. They give you text already in the assessment, so I just copy that over. Command-C if you're on a Mac, or Control-C if you're on a PC. Same thing, Command-V or Control-V will paste it. The specs say 36 points, so I'll grab my character box. 36 points, 48 leading. Okay, we can see that space has been a little wider here. That white space has been increased. And then it says any sans serif font, well, from the approved list. So we'll do Times New Roman. That's always a safe bet. And then I want you to look at this for a minute. The instructions say, make the line breaks at a logical break in the text, but avoid widows. Oh, widows are where you have that one word hanging off the edge or at the bottom of the line. We don't want a widow, but we also don't want our words broken up either. See how this one's hyphenated? A good rule of thumb is to put your line break right after a comma. Okay, so that is a good rule of thumb. Line break after the comma. That's all we needed for page 2. We'll move down to page 3. I'm going to grab the type. Now you'll notice in this one it's 2 paragraphs, so a lot more type than we've been using on the other 2 pages. I'm going to grab my type tool, click and drag, paste my type in. Use my margin lines as a good point of reference to where I drag my anchor points. All right, so let's look at page 3. What are the specs here? 10-point font size, so we'll highlight all of it. You can click and drag your mouse to highlight it, or click Apple A or Control A once you click inside your text box, and that will highlight your text. Go ahead and adjust the font size. It says use the same text is, oh, I'm sorry, on the wrong page. 10-point font, and then 18 leading. This is supposed to be a serif font, so I'm going to use Times New Roman again. And it says be sure to the auto hyphenation is on. So I'll show you where to find that. Auto hyphenation can be found in 2 places, but the easiest way I find is to go to paragraph, your window, type in tables, Click all the way down to your paragraph box. And then on your paragraph box, there's a box here that has a check mark, -8. You want to make sure that is on, okay? If I were to deselect it, or to highlight this and deselect it, it would no longer -8, I guess do like word wrap. It would make sure that all the words are together and never split up. So keep it on, that's what it's asking us. And then let's see, modify the text so that you have a medium column width of 70 to 90 characters. Okay, so what that means is we want a medium column, probably right about here. And then this is a widow, by the way. This is where it's just hanging off the edge. So we do want to avoid that. So just kind of bring it over. Okay, and then it says apply a first line indent of 0.125 inches to the second paragraph. Okay, so what that means is you're going to put your cursor here before your first letter of your first paragraph and go to your paragraph settings here. And first line indent is right here. If you hover over it, it will tell you what it is. You'll just increase that to 0.125 inches. And there you go. It just automatically gave me that indent that I needed. Oh, I do apologize. That says to indent the first line indent of the second paragraph, but do not indent the first paragraph. So don't do what I did. I just messed that up. 0.125 inches on the second paragraph only. Okay. And that's page 4. Okay, page 5. This one says, let's see. It says typeset your first and last name set in all caps. So again, I'm going to draw my text box. This is Woodland, all caps. And then it says in all caps or in upper and lowercase, flush left. The way you find your alignment here is in your paragraph box. Flush left is the first alignment on your paragraph settings here at the top, okay? You can also find it up here at the top of InDesign if you're on your character formatting controls, but this is probably the easiest place to find everything. Okay, and then it says choose a large font size like 72. So I'll go to my character box and change that to 72. Again, if it disappears or a portion of it is only showing, you'll want to just extend that box over so you can see it. It says duplicate your name. So you'll want to use that fancy trick, copy and paste, Command C or Control C, Command V or Control V will paste it. All right, so we've got our name duplicated. We'll leave the first line as it is, so we're not going to touch the first line, but make your typesetting legible, and below your name at the bottom, indicate the specs that you used. Okay, so it's saying leave the first line, but for the second line, you want to make the typesetting legible as well as aesthetically pleasing by kerning the letters. So what I'm going to do is kind of increase the kerning. And the way you do that is going to your character box and your kerning's right here. Okay, so it looks slightly different. Then at the bottom here, it says to indicate the specs that I used. So right here is where I'll put my font size. So I used 72 point. My font was Minion Pro 72 point, and then let's see, what was the kerning? Check the kerning was 60. Okay, so that's what it's asking me to do. That's what it should look like. So we just went through all 5 pages. This should be a pretty simple exercise. Now you can see how it's supposed to be done. Looks like I skipped a page. Oh, you know what? I did skip a page, but I'll let you do page 4. We're going to go ahead and take our 10-minute break. And then I will have you guys, we're going to shift gears. We're going to go into Illustrator, and I'm going to show you some tips and tricks for styling font and text, and how we're going to jump right into our logo designs as well. All right. See you guys in 10 minutes. Okay, guys, so we're back and we're going to kind of shift gears here. We're going to be talking about our assignment one, which is our logos and letter marks assignment. What is a letter mark? I have a video here that I want to share, and we're going to be talking about what a letter mark is. I like this video because it shows lots of different examples and it gives a little introduction into what we're going to be doing. Now, using type and letter forms is important. And before we jump into the video, I want to talk a little bit about what a letter mark is. Are you guys familiar with the different letter mark or the different marks? You might have heard combination mark or letter mark or an emblem or word mark. A word mark is a logo that just uses the name of the company. So like Facebook, right? It's just the letters, it's just the words. These are the uniquely styled text logos that spell out the company or brand name, all right? We won't get into the details about that, but it is important to be able to distinguish it from a letter mark. Letter marks, and I'll show you this slide here, letter marks are exclusively typographic. They use a symbol representing the company through the use of the initials or the brand's first letter. So many companies choose to use this type of logo because their initials can better graphically illustrate the company better than maybe the whole name. Some examples are BBC. Let's see, the rest are not. Letter marks here are H&M, CNN, but the word marks are logos like Jeep or Ferrari, where the entire company name is spelled out. So you're basically taking either the first initial or the first letter of the company or all three or all initials of the company. So again, many companies choose to use this type of logo because their initials can better graphically represent the company better than maybe the full name. Maybe the name's too long, or maybe the name's hard to pronounce, or maybe it's just not different enough to carry its own weight. So these are some reasons why we would choose a letter mark over, say, the word mark or any or a combination mark. Some common letter marks here also are Hewlett Packard, Chanel. Well, let me display it. Hewlett Packard, Chanel, General Electric. These are very common logos that you might see. Let's see. If I were to ask, what are letter marks here? Letter marks would be ESPN, IBM, and FedEx, I believe. Just they're basically the company initials that stand for something, the acronym. Here are some letter relationships that I want you to consider as we're doing logo design. Look how some of these letters flow into each other, or perhaps they're overlapped, or maybe they have a really cool design element to them. There's a lot that you can do, but the way that they're styled really sets them apart. This London grammar, the M's in grammar are actually W's just flipped upside down. So that creates a very unique look to your logo. The T and the F here at the top middle of this slide, the T and the F are, well, first of all, the T is stylized to look like the F, where it just has one extender on the right side and not the left. But also, it kind of flows into each other. So basically, the T and the F, this F was flipped to look like a T. So the T is actually the F flipped upside down. And then they kind of connected it. So it's really interesting. This A and K looks like it's flowing right into each other. That's kind of a neat look. This G and S right here looks really cool. Just look at the relationship of these letters. There's a lot of options that you can do when it comes to letter marks, and it's important to be able to kind of study out what's been done. Use this as a guide to kind of help you. For letter marks, you want to test several options. Use different fonts to make sure to find the one that looks the best. Don't just kind of say, oh, we'll do sans serif for this one. I want you to kind of try out the fonts and do it a couple times so that you can see which ones really look best. Study the different font personalities. Use your font book and use the options that are given to you. Now, you can't just use any fonts for your letter marks. You do need to use what's given to you in the assignment, the folders for the Mac or PC options, but you do have options within there that you can study out and play around with and kind of experiment with and see what looks better for what company. For additional effect, let's talk about positive and negative shapes and spaces. If you take a standard letter and you play with the white space between them, like this airplane here, this kind of creates a really interesting look by using the negative shape. Now, please note that this City Direct is not a letter mark. It's a combination mark where you use a graphic illustration and then the full word, whereas JNC is a letter mark. This HB is a letter mark. Let's see what else. What would be a letter mark? FedEx is a letter mark. This is a cool, interesting use of negative space. If you look at the word pencil, the spacing between the I and the L, they've created the image of a pencil that is white between that space. They use that negative space to create the image of a pencil pointing downward. That is a very creative, simple use of the negative space. When you're doing letter marks, because a lot of students feel like they have to have a lot of fanfare, a lot of flash to their logos. Keep it simple. I want it simple, but I want it to be on purpose and important, and I want it to convey a message. So experiment with the positive and the negative spacing here. You can see with this G how they use the negative space within that G to create a leaf for the green tree logo. Such a clever idea, and it's such a simple idea too. If you think about any of the app icons, look at the apps on your smartphone, or if you have a smart device near you, just kind of open it up and look at the app logos. You'll find that they're very simple and often sometimes are letter marks, but you will need to be able to distinguish between a letter mark, a word mark, and a combination mark, because this assignment will require us just to work with the typography. Remember, it's exclusive typography only. Okay, so I want to show you a video. We're just going to watch a few minutes of it, and you might have already seen it in class, but I find it's very important. So we're going to, okay, give me just a minute to get it set up. All right.
Here we're going to talk about letter forms and logos and the things that you can consider when you're working with letter forms to create an expressive letter mark or type logo. Now, what you see here is a partial screen of the result of a Google search I did for logos. And this page came up filled with logos, many of which I'm sure you recognize. Now, in this course, we're going to work exclusively with types. So the imagery here is not something we're going to consider. But there are a couple of logos here that I feel use type to a very expressive extent, and they're highlighted here. The Oreo logo is one that I think works very well because the fat white letter forms really give us a feeling of the cream that's inside the chocolate cookie. If the letter forms here had been thin or delicate or even colored, it wouldn't work nearly as well. I know you all agree that we get a sense of the rich, opulent cream that's inside the cookies here, and the letter forms help to recognize that. Notice too that the letter forms, while being very fat and sumptuous looking, are still slightly separated so that you can easily read the word. And this is always something to consider when you're working with letter forms. If you can't read it, it's not going to be successful. So over here, we have a logo you may be familiar with, the Guitar Hero video game logo. This is very well done because, again, you can easily read the phrase, even though the letters have been distorted and manipulated such that they fit closely together, like a tight band would, so to speak. And the G and the R, you'll notice, have been stylized, and the points have been manipulated on some of the other letters. The whole effect is one of kind of a Gothic Old English feel, such as many metal bands use in their music. So we get a sense of that hard rock feeling from this really well done logo, all done with letter forms. Over here, we see a very simple one, the Hershey's logo. Now, of course, the dark brown rectangle behind the letter forms signifies the delicious chocolate bar that's inside the package. You'll notice too that the letter forms are not treated that extensively. It's a very simple treatment, but the letters are all caps. They're in a bold sans serif typeface, very tightly spaced, very tidy, again, very easy to read. But the way that this works, I think, is the fact that the letters are all capitals. That implies confidence, boldness, and it also makes for a nice rectangle. Is to work with a toy store logo, Jumping Spider Toys. And here I have worked a little bit with the letter forms to express the nature of some of the things you can do to make this successful for you. And I'm going to make this a little smaller so we can see the screen. JST, the three letters of the company, are treated in a couple of different ways. And you'll notice that down here I have a listing of things you can do design-wise to work with your type. You can work with scale or size. You can change them. You can use mixed typefaces, such as I have done in this logo here, and mixing up the type to work. You can use mixed case, as I talked about a moment ago. Here the T is lowercase, and yet the capital S and J work with the lowercase t here. And you'll notice that in some cases the letters touch, signifying unity. You can work with different type styles. You can mix bold and italic. You can work certainly with color. And for a toy store, I'm sticking with bright primary colors, which are appealing to children. The way that you place and relate the letters to one another is really important. Here I've taken the background purple rectangle and I have angled it a little bit to imply playfulness.
Okay, so we're gonna stop right there. She gives some instructions that are a little
outdated for the assignment. So the first thing I wanted to clarify is that we are only to design in black and white for this assignment. This assignment doesn't allow us to use color, and there's a few reasons why, a few good reasons. The first reason is the fact that color we kind of use as a crutch. We'll use multiple colors because we try to overcompensate for the fact that we're not quite sure the direction that we want to go in with the logo design. So I really appreciate the fact that we're just going to design in black and white. Also, black and white designs require a more simple approach than color. With color, things can get complex. And so it's important to make sure that we stay simple. So again, it forces us to kind of think in a more simplified manner by doing black and white logos. The next thing I want to kind of make sure is that everything we do is on purpose, okay? And so we'll get into these logo designs here. I'm trying to decide what direction I want to go with. Let's look at some letter marks here. You're given 4 companies. You need 8 pages of design. And I'm an illustrator, and it's going to be set up a little differently. So let's set up our project first of all. Let's go into File. I've got Illustrator open. Let me see if I can. Am I in Illustrator? Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So we're going to jump into Illustrator. I'll give you a minute to get it launched. You're going to go into File, click on New, select a new document. And it likes to take a while to think, so bear with me. All right. So you can set up an 8.5 by 11 page. That's fine. And your orientation will need to be portrait. But right here where it says artboards, you'll need to put in 8 because you need 2 options for each company. So you need 2 logo designs for each company. So total of 8 artboards. Artboards are pages, basically. That's the difference from InDesign. You won't need anything else. You'll just hit create. Your document will look a lot like this, okay? So I'll go back to this project here. Now, when designing the JST logo, first thing that I like to do when approaching this logo is to think about the company I'm designing for. Now, we've talked about what's appropriate font choices for a toy store. I think in this case, a sans serif is appropriate. You could use a serif font, that's just fine too. In fact, you'll have a lot of options to choose from, but again, kind of type out each font and just kind of see what it looks like. Now, you could do a play on the J or a play on the JST if you'd like. With this, there's a lot of different options you could do. I'll do a, whoops, that is not what I want. Hold on, I'm in the wrong font. Give me just a second. Let's use Futura. And there's a lot of options. The reason why I'm not going to go into too much detail and do each logo for you is because you need to be able to have your own creativity. In this case, I will say I wouldn't necessarily copy what I've designed. I'd try to come up with something on your own so that you can, with logo design, we can't copy other logos in the real world. So try to come up with a concept that's all your own. You can take a spin off of mine if you want and then try to put your own twist on it. That would be great too. All right, so I'm going to do Futura here. I'm going to type in, I don't like the look of that J actually, so we're not going to do Futura. Let's do Helvetica. Let's find a good serif font that I can use. I wonder which one I was using. Sorry, I apologize. Let's try, I want one with a good curve to the J. Let's do Helvetica New, and then we'll do a heavy, not a heavy, let's go to a bold condensed. That's fine. I think that's the one I was using. Okay, we'll do a bold condensed on this J. And I've kind of designed a JST logo here. The first thing that you could do is show that with a toy company, the letters are jumping. You know, it's jumping to spider toys. So the first thing I like to do is pick out the adjectives, the descriptive words in the company name, and try to design around that. You could use the word toys and try to come up with something that's kind of reminiscent of a toy. Or spider, you could maybe design something that kind of symbolizes a spider. Or jumping, in this case, for this first logo example, I gave the letters a slight tilt and angle to make them look like they're jumping off the page. There's a lot of different things you can do. In fact, you do need to stay with black and white, and no grayscale is allowed. But in this case, what I did was I just took the letters J, S, T, and I liked the lowercase because I felt like lowercase looked a little bit more playful than an uppercase font. And after you type in your letters, if you go to type, create outlines, what this does is it vectorizes the lettering now. Now will have its own, each letter will have its own anchor points that you can manipulate and change. You'll right click to ungroup them. And by doing that, now they're their own separate entity here instead of one word. So this is good when you're doing logo design, but also you might want to make a copy of what you were doing because you can't change font or font styles once you've converted outlines. A few things you could do. I like to hover my mouse. If you select a letter and hover your mouse over a corner anchor point, notice how my mouse icon changes to a curved double-sided arrow. If you click and hold, you can slightly give your letters a little twist. You don't want to be too extreme. And that looks playful to me. I mean, just that slight angle on the letters. Another thing you could do is make this S look like it's jumping off the page. Or you can leave it as is. You could even do something like, let me grab this. See, let's do a parenthesis. You see that? And I'm going to make it much smaller. Oh, it's too small. And I want it lighter. I don't want it so heavy. And then I'll go to type, create outlines. What am I going to do with this? Let's see. Just by creating those two elements there, this almost gives the illusion Let's kind of shake, rattle, and roll idea here. There's a little movement to my letters. So now this looks like a toy. It could be a rattle. It could be something that's got movement like a toy does. Let's see, I can even make this even smaller. Again, we don't want the effects to be the star of the show. We want the company name to be the star of the show. So I'll make them smaller. You can even position them here in the middle. Straight across, and I'll just rotate. Like that. So that can give some movement to your letters. It looks like it gives the illusion that it's moving. So it's another option. What I did with this top logo is I took the Helvetica font, but I didn't like this square, boxy look to my logo. So if you release the compound path, right click on it, it's kind of like ungrouping it. You can delete the dot of the I, and I just grabbed a circle. I just drew a circle and try to draw it proportionate to the J. You want to kind of make sure it's lined up correctly though. And then that also gave it a little bit more of a playful look by rounding out that dot of the I. If I were to have left it square, I don't think it would have had the same effect. Another thing that you can do with the logo is instead of giving it movement, you could give it legs and make it look like a what? A spider, right? You can do that. There's lots of different ways you can go about it, but that's something interesting. But keep it simple. Again, we want it very, very simple. So that's the JST logo. Let's look at another logo. Let's look at the Italian Bistro logo. I took a serif font here. I used Dido. And I kept the capital letters. I'll go to type, create outlines. By holding down shift, it will constrain the proportions so you can resize your lettering or your objects. And if you'll notice, in this case, I made the I a little bit bigger so it stood out, kind of like it was a serving platter. So I'll ungroup this. I will make the I a little bit bigger, and I'm going to make the T and the B a little smaller. Now I could do this. This is a neat way to kind of, once you start playing with the scaling of the letters, you'll see, oh, this gives me a completely different effect than what I have up here. But by maintaining the I's large size, what I can do is give this B and this T some space. I can adjust the tracking a little bit. And then I just drew a circle here and gave it a dot to the I. The I was already a capital letter. It was already uppercase. But what I'm going to do with this I is I'm going to create kind of an illusion that there's pizza. But it's still all typographic. I'm going to make a triangle. Easy way to make a triangle is if you click on the polygon tool. It's in your hidden tools here. If you click once on the artboard and give the sides 3 sides, you'll get a triangle. If you go here at the top where your stroke is, or here at the bottom of your toolbar, and make sure your stroke box is in the foreground, you can click white, and your stroke is white. You can increase the stroke weight, and then I'm going to just rotate this at an angle. I'm going to position it into my pizza slice, make it a little smaller. So you could do something like that, or you can make it extremely small. And bring it in like that. So that's a very simple touch to using you still chose a very classic, very nice font, the Dido font. But in this case, and I thought it looked fine even without the pizza slice. I thought it looked good by just having the T and the TB, TIB, just like this. I thought that was kind of a neat look. Okay, so that's also an option. That's what I chose to do. But again, you can choose to do something else. Here's another example. I simply just took the Futura font, like this. You type it out, TIB. It's kind of a cool look too. I like the lowercase of Dido a lot, actually. Dido is a great font. TIB, I went to, let's see, edit, or not edit, I'm sorry, type, create outlines. Hold down shift as I extend to make it a little bit bigger. And I did not mess with the tracking or I didn't mess with the tracking or the spacing at all. But what I did want to do was make this look like it was a restaurant, representing a restaurant. So what I did was I just grabbed my line tool and I went at an angle, like the T was holding that little circle like an olive, like you would see in a martini glass. And I'm going to give the stroke a very small, thin black stroke. So it's almost like there's an olive at the top of my toothpick. That's kind of the idea that you would see like in a martini glass. You can kind of work on the angling a little bit. But again, a very simple concept. So it's like the T is holding the olive. I didn't do anything other than making the typography the star of the show. But by adding a very subtle element to it, I'm preserving the lettermark look, but giving it this is easily distinguishable from my jumping spider logo. You see how I did that? They're both sans serif, but this is very easily discernible that this is a restaurant logo, and this looks more like a playful toy store logo. Now, what I don't want to see is if you angle the letters, a lot of students see, oh, that's cool, I can tilt the letters and I can angle them. And then they angle the letters for the Italian restaurant, they angle the letters for the bank, they angle the letters for the computer company. If you're going to use one effect, I would do one effect per company, okay? So if you're going to angle letters for the toy store, then you've used your one effect for that logo. Now your next effect might be to use your stroke font. Okay, that might be an effect for that logo. Then the next effect will be, so whatever it is, just try to change it up so that your toy store logos don't look like your Italian restaurant logos. The whole point is to make them look different and distinguishable. So that's the important part there. I wanted to show you another simple trick to logo designs. We saw that playing with the negative space can create a really cool illusion. I'm just using a standard Futura heavy font here. And by drawing a line and giving it a heavy white stroke, I'm kind of using it to divide my B all the way down, or even right here on one side. what this does is it almost looks like it's a lock, right? Whoop. I chose a sans serif font that had that cool kind of that doorway look, that arc on the B. And by doing this, this looks like a double-sided lock. So I wouldn't even need the O and the L in this case. I could take this B and rotate it. If you hold shift, it will lock it down in place. So this could be the logo or the lettermark itself, because a lettermark is an icon by using the letters or the letter in the company name. So the B and then the O could be the white space and the L can be that foundation there. So that's kind of cool. That's a cool look. And then this open lock, double-sided lock, is kind of a neat illustration here. But I'll back up. So in case you can even just do one side where it's locked, but this one's unlocked. That's kind of a neat look. You could just kind of think of ways or things that kind of distinguish each logo from themselves. But I did like the fact that one lock was open and one was not. Kind of a neat look. So that's using negative space, okay? You can also, if you zoom in, manipulate the negative space within a letter by selecting the letter and clicking on your direct selection tool, which is your white arrow. So in this case, I can adjust the look of this white space or delete it altogether. Like that. So I don't recommend doing it too much to the extreme, but you can manipulate the white space within a letter for sure. All right, so that's the bank logo. I did want to show you real quick here. This is a letter mark for a paperclip company and how they got that look. So what you do is, they created a paperclip, created the letter P out of a paperclip, which is really kind of a clever, simple concept. You draw a circle with your stroke. I'm going to set that to about 8 point. And then if I select the circle and click my direct selection tool, if I click the left arrow, you'll notice how these 3 anchor points are selected. By clicking delete, I can delete half of the circle now. So what I'm going to do is set I'm going to kind of shrink it down here. I'll do a large circle. I'm going to copy it and bring it over. Do a small circle, copy that. This is actually going to get flipped. All right, so this one will stay over here. This one goes inside. And then by clicking on your, I'll zoom in so you can see, this one's going to line up with this top one here. I'm going to kind of eyeball it. If I click on the large circle and then I click my direct selection point, click on this anchor point, click on the pen tool, I can kind of run it into each other. That makes for a cool look. And then same with this one. I'm going to continue this one. I'm going to click on this one, click the pen tool. I want it to kind of go about right here. So I'm going to make a little smaller. And this one I'm going to take the pen tool as well, click on it. Right about here is where I want to go with it. And kind of bring it down so it gives the illusion Oops. All right, and then with this one, click on the pen tool. You've created your P. So that's kind of a neat look. If you wanted to kind of extend it, you can kind of bring it down. And then this one, bring it down as well. Just like that. So you'll get a different effect every time. But that is how you create, and this alone could stand as the letter mark. Now, you're not supposed to use background colors, but you could do a black circle and then just make the stroke white and bring it in the circle. Like this. I'm going to right click, arrange to the back. Right click, bring the paperclip to the front. Got to make it more of an oval. And that would be a letter mark on its own. But you know, the fact we don't need backgrounds on these. I don't want you to see, I don't want to see gradients. I don't want to see any patterns. Just very simple, straightforward, unadulterated logo designs with your typography. No backgrounds, no grayscale. Everything does need to be black and white. But that's just a simple way that gives you another idea of how to create typography that's unique and is set apart. So I want you to kind of think about what you're going to do for the assignment. We're going to shift gears here. I'm going to go, there's some types and tricks. We're not going to get to all of these, but I did want to show you just a few things that you could do. One of the things to take a very common font, a classic font, and you can round the corners. If you round corners, this also makes something a little bit more playful. Very simple to do. Another really easy Illustrator effect that you can apply is round corners. And so the way that we do that is if you grab your type tool, just kind of type in the word tone. Okay, and you'll notice that I'm using a Futura font with a very boxy corners, boxy straight edges. I'm going to try to round these out a little bit. So select some text with the box selected. If you go to Effect at the top of your screen here, Effect, and then go to Style, Stylize Round Corners, right here. And if you click on the preview box, it will let you see what you're doing. You can increase the radius, but the further you increase it, the more rounded your corners get and a more extreme look you'll get as well. And you'll get something that looks like this. So this is a live effect that you can edit both in the text and the radius at the same time without starting over, having to retrace your steps. A lot different than creating outlines. But when you're done tweaking, you can convert the text to outlines. So in this case, I'll go to Effect, Stylize, Round Corners. I'm going to apply a new effect. I'm going to do a very subtle cancel. Hold on. Select this. Effect, Stylize, Round Corners. And you can give it a rounded effect like this. And then when you're done, you go to Type, Create Outlines. And now each letter is rounded on its own, so you can ungroup them. Oops. You'll be able to play around with that. So this is not a permanent effect. This is a great way to add a custom feel to a font in a logo. It also makes the typeface look more unique. It helps break away from design, from a design that looks too standard. So giving it some rounded corners. This is also, well, I should say, unfortunately, the round corner effect can wreak havoc on certain letter shapes. It only tends to work best on letters with the fewest curves. So if you find a very straight edged, very boxy font, this is probably best for it. If you already have a round font, this is not going to be appropriate to use. Just be sure to pay close attention when you're applying the effect, and then go back and repair any curves that may have been damaged, okay? So that is rounded corners. That's one thing I wanted to show you. Let's look at playing with letter forms. I showed you this a little bit, but when you realize that you're not stuck with boring forms that your fonts have by default, since you're using very standard fonts, the possibilities really open up for you. So what I want to show you is how to utilize the direct selection tool and the Pathfinder tool. You can make a ton of awesome enhancements that take your text much further than simple color and size could ever do. And I think that this look here in black and white looks far cooler than any colored logo that you'd see. So let's see how this works by starting with just plain old sans serif type here. I'm using a Futura Bold on my type box. The first thing that you're going to want to do is convert your text to outlines. So you go to Type, Create Outlines. And then let's see. We're going to turns this text or these letters into shapes. When we do that, we're given much more freedom over how we can customize the letters. So if you right click on them and click on Ungroup, they're now individual custom letters. Well, I guess the text is now converted into shapes. So next, using your direct selection tool, which is the white arrow, you're going to or pressing A on the keyboard, you're going to select the inner portions of the P and O, or maybe any other letters that you have that have trapped negative space, okay? So in this case, the trapped negative space is this white portion of my P and the white portion of my O. And with a simple click and delete, I can now get rid of that negative space like I showed you earlier. There we go. So there's that. The next step is going to be a little tricky. There's multiple steps that are shown here that I am about to show you, but first I want you to take the T and the Y and overlap them. So we're going to kind of move the Y over the T a little bit. Then I want you to select and copy only the Y. You might want to just make a duplicate. So I'm going to Command C, Command V, or Control C, Control V to copy it. So this is my extra Y here hanging out at the bottom. We're going to place it off to the side. Next, make sure that the Y is on top. So if you click your Y and right click, Arrange, Bring to Front, the Y is in the front now. It's on top. So then you select both letters, and you're going to hit the second button in the Pathfinder palette. It's called minus front. Where's the Pathfinder palette? Well, you go to Window, scroll down to Pathfinder, and it will bring up another box another handy dialog box. And it's the second option here. Let's see, minus front is this one right here under the shape modes. If you click that, all of a sudden the Y disappears, but it left the indent when they overlapped. So now I can move this Y back up right here. And that looks pretty cool. Same thing. Well, let's use another Pathfinder tool. Now let's go through the same steps, but this time let's use, instead of using the Y to cut off the top left corner of the P, we're going to then bring the P down and close the Y like this example right here, like I did here. Okay, so we're going to move this P in. I'm going to kind of bring it in underneath the Y a little bit, give the same amount of space as you see between the Y and the T. Okay, and I'm going to make sure that edge will get clipped nicely. So here's what we want to do. I'll make a copy of the P, Make sure the P is on the front top layer. Click minus front. Let's see. Oh, I don't think it's working because I got rid of my anchor points. So we'll click these two, hit minus front. There we go. Whoops. Let's put the Y in the front. Bring to front. I'll make a copy of the Y and see if that will give me the effect I want. Minus front. There we go. And I can put that Y back. Perfect. Then I've got my TYP. And now I can place the O over here where it slightly overlaps the corner of the Y and some of the P. Make this O a little smaller so it's not so large. Like this. And there you have it. That's another way to play with your letter forms. So I hope these tips and tricks kind of encourage you to take a second look at the fonts that you have and start seeing them as tools to help you create a beautiful custom type rather than just finished pieces of art that you just need to drop in. You can see these other variations that I used. By playing with the Pathfinder tool, you can create some really cool overlapping effects. There's some other effects that we didn't get to today. We'll have to probably cover next time. But if you have any questions, let me know. We tried to cover a good portion of the assignment 1 and assessment 1. Email me if you have any questions. Come to the multi-session this Wednesday. We'll bring any questions you have, bring your assignment, and we can help and work on it. You can even pass off assignments in the multi-session and get a grade on the spot. So not only do you get feedback on the spot, but you can also get a grade on the spot. So it's a win-win for everybody. I like it, and students seem to like it too. So I look forward to meeting you guys, and I'll see you on Wednesday. Thank you for coming.